Hey, I'm Barnes Courtney, and I'm hanging out with Rob on Front Row Live.
LA show, first time on a bus. Like, what's going on, man?
Man, I feel pretty fancy, I'm not gonna lie. I'm feeling very saucy on this bus.
Yeah. How coming or doing this tour with a bus for the very first time? Like, what's that comfort level now? And like, does that change the way that you kind of hang out at the venues every day?
Totally. I mean, before I actually got more sleep, weirdly, doing crazy drives and like waking up at 7 a.m. to get to the next place. Because when you're in your bed, you sleep. Whereas on the bus, it is so easy to get caught in that wave of like adrenaline and hedonism and just continue the party onto the bus while you're driving.
Right.
So yeah, but it's a hell of a lot of fun.
That's cool. That's cool. Now you're on tour right now for your sophomore album, 404. Like, what is the significance, or how does 404 relate to Air? Like, as all of us like millennials know this whole like Air as online.
I liked the idea of having an album title that was a little bit cryptic. I love that Drake logo with the praying hands and the number.
Right.
And you kind of have to dig a little bit to find out. Oh, okay, so it's the numbers, the area code for Toronto, and the praying hands like God, the God of Toronto.
Right.
So I like to emulate that in my own album title. I suppose a lot of the record was recorded in this childhood bedroom of my long-term collaborator, Sam Bartle, who goes by the name Look Mom No Computer.
Okay.
And he makes all these like Mad Max synthesizers out of Furbies, like bits of junk, 90s, 80s technology. And when we started writing in there, I really found that Bowie idea of the place you write in having a huge pull on the subject matter and sound of your record to be very true. We were originally going to write a lot of the album in his bedroom in London, but we had noise complaints to the neighbors. So we ended up in this studio that I hadn't been in his old bedroom in his parents' house that we used to write in when we were like, teenagers.
Wow.
And it really colored the subject matter of the record to be about the loss of your authentic self as you age. Like the idea of nostalgia being bittersweet, searching for elements of yourself that were present for a moment but ultimately gone forever. Right. And being a child of the 90s and the digital age, I thought that 404 was a really apt metaphor for that. In that a 404 era is when a computer's searching for a page that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Like on the record, I'm searching for elements of who I was when I was a bit more real and a genuine expression of a child, as opposed to this like jaded, flawed adult that we all ultimately turn into in one way or another.
Right. And it's cool because obviously you're on a major label, but you chose to do this like you've done all your life. Going back to your friend's house, going to your friend and collaborating with your friend. Like, how does that how did it change this time around with him as far as his creative process? Because like I remember you mentioned back in the day you guys like created a snare out of like something completely different. So how has his creative process kind of like evolved on this album for you?
On the first record, I was so consumed with depression and anxiety and bitterness, having struggled for years and years and really genuinely been worried for that entire time that I might not ever make it into music anymore.
Wow.
So my particular expression on that record was very intentional, and it was quite cathartic for me. I was so consumed with those emotions that it was very difficult for Sam to get any of his sonic influences in there.
Okay.
As far as this record goes, I live this incredible life where I get to hang out on tour buses and, I get to hang out with my best friends on the bus, just laughing and joking, going on nights out. I felt much more loose and much freer on this record. So I think Sam's natural creativity on the synthesizer side of things was able to come out and express itself a lot more.
Right.
But on this album, I basically had to relearn how to write songs because I was so used to the inspiration and the drive coming out of this cathartic process, coming from all this emotional turmoil I was experiencing.
Right.
And now that I'm in a place where I'm happy, I had to look elsewhere for inspiration.
Isn't it interesting how like when someone's sad or depressed, like that's when more inspiration comes out, and then when you're like living the best life, it's like kind of hard to like put something to paper.
I think it's definitely easy when you're depressed, in that some people find a way to transmute those very present, consuming emotions into something positive.
Right.
I don't think it's necessarily easier, but a lot of musicians, I believe, fall into the art through being overwhelmed by those emotions.
Yeah.
But in terms of writing when you're happy, I do believe it's possible to do very well. There's lots of amazing albums out there that, are wonderful, positive, upbeat records.
Right.
But it comes from a different place, and the technique, I believe, is different.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, you kind of relearned how to write. How did you challenge yourself with learning how to write all over again?
It was definitely a process. I wanted to make sure that all the songs came from a genuine place, and that I had something to say on the songs that I was writing. But I mean, it was very explorative, this new album. It starts in a very synth-heavy place, where I allowed Sam to take more of the reins on the soundscape. With the first 3 tracks on the record, it kind of devolves into this more guitar soundscape, and then finishes up in the last couple songs in a marriage between the two. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but I can at least say that I just let the music come out and wasn't too analytical about it.
Right.
And this is a pure expression of where I'm at right now.
Right. And as you mentioned earlier, you said like with this record, you were more real. So when you're being more real in your music, especially when you're in the studio recording it, do you try and keep that first initial recording, or do you see yourself kind of taking multiple takes in the studio?
A lot of this album, the vocals that you hear are the first time I conceptualized or ever sung the lyrics. So on tracks like Cannonball or in the verses of Boy Like Me, you're hearing me improvising lyrics, which I hadn't done on the first record at all. I mean, the first album was very real for me in terms of it was a real expression of what I was going through, but I wanted to maintain that on this record. And, it was certainly a challenge, but I really enjoyed the process of figuring out who I am as an artist, separate to all of the trials and tribulations I had on the first record.
Right. What track do you feel like challenged you the most on this album?
Man, I mean, like, 99, I probably had most of that track sitting around in my head for like 3 or 4 years. And I knew all I needed was this synth line for the chorus to finish it. And we drove ourselves nuts. I mean, it was just fucking, it was like pulling teeth. And, I'm with Sam. It was like an anthropological experiment. I'm with this guy every day, from when I wake up in the morning all day long, last thing I see at night, and then again for a month. And I mean, I was literally like in the fetal position under a chair, just like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. And then eventually it just came, and I remember physically feeling like part of my brain had actually like physically shifted, like railroad tracks had changed when it suddenly hit me, and I was like, oh, okay, here it is. Yeah. But it was a nightmare.
I mean, obviously that song is a big hit today, but why did you feel like it was such an important song to you? I mean, 3 to 4 years, that's a long time to hold on to something that you're not even sure if you can finish.
Yeah, that tends to be the way that I write. Bits and bobs will float around in my head for a while, and then they'll kind of resurface and reappear. I just try to write stuff that I like, and that feels exciting and genuine to me in the time. Right. And that song decided to surface for this record, along with a number of other songs that are kind of in the same ilk. So I guess it was meant to be.
Now, do you feel like there was a big evolution in like your creative process with this record?
Yeah, definitely. The first album, I had to write those songs or I was going to die. Man. It was a complete catharsis. I was so depressed and like just full of like anger and bitterness, and so upset that my life had degenerated into this like, you know, struggle where I was on welfare, and all my friends were, you know, like the Struts, who I'd been on the same management as, were like killing it in America, and my buddy was killing it with his management company, and I was just sofa surfing and kind of this fuck up, right? So for this album, I didn't feel the sense of urgency, and the songs weren't pouring out of me as a direct result of extreme sadness.
Right.
So it was interesting figuring out, well, how do I have fun writing tunes if I'm not writing them to stay alive?
That's crazy. That's crazy. Like, do you feel like you had to kind of step away from the music for a little bit? Did that even happen at one point where you just, you know, like, I don't want to hear anything, I don't want to even try to make music?
Yeah, but I never have. That's the thing. I've never had to try, ever. So sometimes I wonder if I'm actually inherently quite lazy, you know? Because I was kind of like, okay, I'm here. Come on, write songs.
So you mentioned how you had your friends, the Struts, and your friends around you were succeeding, but you were still kind of in that bubble. How do you kind of keep yourself from like staying in that depression mode where it's like, you know what, I'm a failure, like I can't make it, like why are they doing it? Like how do you lift yourself up from that?
I mean, I enjoy having a certain level of inferiority complex. I find it useful, you know? And I think a lot of people do. I mean, you know, Einstein thought in his own mind that he was a complete fraud, and any day someone was going to work out that he wasn't as good as everyone said he was. And he had this to an extreme degree. Same with Tchaikovsky. He thought he was a complete failure as well, which ultimately drove him to write amazing works.
Right.
But in terms of maintaining happiness, first of all, my life is completely different to how it was.
Yeah.
I am, like, in many ways, like, living my dream, and I hang out with my favorite people every day.
Nice.
I get to go and see new cities and feel the sense of adventure of being on the road. It's amazing. So that, in and of itself, immediately makes it much easier for me to be happy and enjoy life, as opposed to the kind of person I was. But I think in a more general sense, you know, you can build momentum either way. And when you build a certain amount of momentum towards depression with your thought process, with your self-talk, with the way you talk about your life, the way that you put your focus towards people who have more than you, you know, it can be very dangerous. But by the same token, you can start to slowly build that momentum the other way into self-fulfillment and happiness. And I do believe that all of those things are created internally outward,
Right.
as opposed to the other way around. And I wouldn't be here on this bus if I hadn't, in some ways, through releasing these tensions through my music and through shifting my focus away from these guys are doing better than me to let's just focus on making some tunes.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I got you. Well, congratulations with 404, another great record that you've created, sophomore album. You guys be sure to check out Barnes Courtney on tour right now. New album 404 is out now. Thanks for watching on Front Row Live.